There are things about money that most people will never be told because the truth is uncomfortable. And tonight, I need you to listen carefully. Not casually, not half distracted, because what I'm about to share isn't theory and it's not motivation. It's something I learned from the inside. Years ago, I walked away from practices most people don't even believe are real. Rituals, energy manipulation, spoken words layered with intention. I saw how belief shapes reality, how repeated words become contracts, how fear becomes a doorway. And the one area where I saw the most silent manipulation wasn't love, it wasn't health, it was money. You think you're just bad with finances. You think you weren't taught properly. You think the economy is against you. But what if the real issue isn't what you're doing with money, but what has been done to your mind about money? Because there are curses that don't look like curses. They don't involve candles or chants. They don't require someone standing in a dark room whispering your name. These are far more sophisticated. They're planted early, repeated often, reinforced socially. And once they take root, they quietly drain your power for decades. The first hidden curse is this: the curse of inherited poverty identity. Not poverty itself, identity. There is a difference. I've watched people win money and lose it within months. I've seen opportunities handed to capable individuals who somehow sabotage them. And when I used to sit in rooms where people spoke about binding someone's prosperity, the target was never their wallet. It was their self-concept. If you believe deep down that wealth is not for people like you, you will unconsciously reject it. You'll feel uncomfortable when money grows. You'll spend to return to what feels familiar. You'll distrust success. You'll shrink in rooms where abundance lives. That's not coincidence. From childhood, many of us heard phrases that acted like spells. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people are greedy. People like us have to struggle. Be realistic. Spoken casually. Repeated yearly. Layered with emotion. And here's the secret. Repetition plus emotion equals programming. I learned that principle in ritual practice long before I saw it in psychology books. Say something often enough with strong feeling, and the subconscious treats it as law. So if you were raised in an environment where struggle was normalized, where stress around bills was constant, where success was viewed with suspicion, you didn't just inherit habits, you inherited energetic expectations. And expectations shape decisions. You might work hard, you might pray, you might try new strategies. But if the identity underneath says, I am someone who barely gets by, then your actions will bend to match that identity. This is why some people rise quickly, while others feel like they're running in sand. It's not about intelligence. It's not about worth. It's about internal permission. And the most dangerous part? You don't feel cursed. You just feel unlucky. The second hidden curse is far more subtle than inherited identity. It doesn't scream. It doesn't show up as obvious fear. It hides behind something that looks spiritual, humble, even moral. It is the curse of guilt around wealth. This one is powerful because it disguises itself as virtue. When I was still inside those circles, there was something I noticed repeatedly. People who wanted to block someone's financial flow rarely attacked their skill or their opportunities directly. Instead, they planted doubt around deserving. Because when someone feels guilty about having more, they will unconsciously reduce themselves to feel safe again. You may not realize this, but many of you were conditioned to associate money with corruption. You heard that wealthy people are selfish, that money changes people, that too much is dangerous, that spiritual people shouldn't care about wealth, that wanting abundance is somehow shallow. And so you grew up with a quiet conflict. You want financial freedom. You want stability. You want to breathe without counting every expense. But at the same time, there is a voice in the background whispering, "Don't become one of them." That whisper matters because money amplifies who you already are. But if you secretly believe it will make you bad, you will keep it at a distance. Let me tell you something I observed closely. In ritual work, intention always followed belief. If someone believed wealth was evil, their energy around money was tense, conflicted, resistant. And resistance is not neutral. Resistance pushes away. In practical terms, here's how this curse plays out. You undercharge for your skills. You hesitate to negotiate. You feel uncomfortable receiving praise or payment. You avoid looking at your bank account. You say things like, "I'm not doing this for the money," even when money would solve real problems in your life. You give excessively, even when you're struggling. On the surface, these behaviors look generous or humble, but underneath there is often guilt, and guilt creates self-punishment. I've seen people sabotage promotions because they didn't feel worthy of earning more than their parents. I've seen entrepreneurs cap their own growth because surpassing their community felt like betrayal. I've seen talented individuals stay small because success would separate them from friends who bonded over struggle. That's the curse. It binds you not through fear of failure, but fear of elevation. When you rise financially, dynamics shift. People treat you differently. Expectations change. Relationships adjust. And if your nervous system associates wealth with isolation or judgment, it will protect you by keeping you financially limited. Protection can look like procrastination. It can look like bad luck. It can look like constantly just missing the breakthrough. But often, it is internal resistance born from guilt. There is something else most people never consider. In the circles I left, we understood something about vows. A vow does not have to be spoken formally to function. If, as a child, you saw your family struggle and silently decided, "I will never become someone who thinks they're better than us," that moment created an internal contract. You didn't mean to curse yourself. You were trying to stay loyal. But loyalty without awareness can cost you decades of abundance. You are allowed to outgrow financial patterns. You are allowed to earn more than anyone in your bloodline. You are allowed to succeed without abandoning your values. But until you emotionally separate wealth from wickedness, you will continue to push it away. And then there is the third curse. This one is the most dangerous of all because it operates invisibly in your daily language. It doesn't require upbringing alone. It doesn't depend on morality. It feeds off repetition in the present moment. It is the curse of powerless speech. When I first began learning about intention, I was taught that words are carriers. Not poetic metaphor, carriers. Words carry belief. Belief directs attention. Attention shapes action. Action produces results. So if someone repeatedly says, "I'm broke, I can't afford it, money disappears from me, I'm terrible with finances," those statements are not harmless. Your subconscious does not process sarcasm the way you think it does. It records repetition. It absorbs identity statements. It filters opportunities based on what you've declared to be true. Most people speak defeat over their finances daily without realizing it. You joke about being poor. You exaggerate scarcity. You narrate your struggle constantly. And then you wonder why nothing shifts. In ritual environments, repetition of a phrase with emotion was how intentions were sealed. Now think about how often you've said certain phrases about your money with frustration, fear, or shame. That emotional charge matters. Your nervous system begins to anticipate lack. You notice bills more than opportunities. You expect things to cost more than you can handle. You interpret neutral events as financial threats. Your brain becomes trained to confirm the story you keep telling. And here is where it becomes even more serious. When you constantly declare limitation, you train yourself to avoid expansion. You stop researching investments because it's not for people like me. You don't apply for higher roles because they won't choose me anyway. You don't start that side project because it probably won't work. Speech becomes self-fulfilling architecture. This third curse is not about superstition, it's about alignment. If your language says you are powerless, your decisions will reflect that powerlessness. I remember one specific moment that shifted everything for me. I heard someone say with complete conviction, "Nothing ever works out for me financially." And I realized something chilling. They weren't describing their reality, they were maintaining it. When you speak as a victim of money, you unconsciously position money as an external force that controls you. But money is neutral. It responds to structure, strategy, skill, consistency, and belief. If you feel powerless around it, you will never take full ownership of it. And ownership is the beginning of power. So now you see the pattern. The first curse shapes your identity. The second curse attaches guilt to your growth. The third curse weakens your authority through your own words. None of these require dark rituals. They require conditioning, and conditioning can be broken. But before I show you how to break them, you need to understand something even deeper about how these three curses work together. Because they are not separate. They form a cycle. And that cycle is what has kept you stuck for years without you ever realizing you were bound. Now listen carefully because this is where everything connects. The first curse told you who you are. The second curse told you what you deserve. The third curse dictated what you repeatedly declare. Identity, deserving, declaration. When those three align in limitation, your financial reality has no choice but to reflect it. This is the cycle. You grow up absorbing an identity of struggle. That identity makes you uncomfortable with wealth. The discomfort creates guilt. The guilt makes you speak cautiously or negatively about money. Those words reinforce the identity again, and the loop tightens. No candles required, no rituals necessary, just repetition. And here's what I need you to understand. Cycles feel natural when you're inside them. You don't feel bound. You feel realistic, logical, practical. You say, I'm just being honest about my situation. But honesty without awareness can become a prison. When I walked away from the practices I used to be part of, I had to confront something terrifying. I had to admit that the most powerful spells I had ever seen weren't done in secret rooms. They were done in living rooms, at dinner tables, in classrooms, on social media, in casual conversations about how hard life is. Mass repetition is powerful. And when millions of people constantly repeat narratives of scarcity, debt, survival, and struggle, those narratives feel like truth. They feel collective. They feel confirmed. But truth and conditioning are not the same thing. Here's the deeper layer. Money is not just currency. It is stored decision-making power. It is freedom of movement. It is access. It is choice. And when you feel powerless financially, it leaks into every area of your life. You tolerate jobs that drain you. You stay in environments that shrink you. You silence ideas because they feel too risky. You settle. Powerlessness around money becomes powerlessness in identity. And that is why breaking these curses is not about becoming rich. It's about reclaiming authority. So how do you break them? You don't fight them emotionally. You don't panic. You don't shame yourself for past beliefs. You replace them deliberately. First, you rewrite identity. Instead of asking, why am I always struggling? You begin asking, what would someone who builds wealth consistently do in this situation? Do you hear the shift? You stop reacting as your past self and start responding as your future self. Identity must move before income does. You begin exposing yourself to different financial realities, not to envy them, to normalize them. You study people who built wealth ethically. You observe how they think, how they allocate, how they speak about opportunity. You allow your nervous system to realize abundance is not dangerous. Familiarity dissolves fear. Second, you dismantle guilt. You sit with the uncomfortable question, if I became financially secure, who would I be afraid of disappointing? Sometimes it's family. Sometimes it's friends. Sometimes it's an old version of yourself that bonded over struggle. Growth can feel like betrayal when struggle was your shared language. But understand this, elevating your financial position does not erase your roots. It expands your capacity. You can help more. You can give more. You can create more options for others. Wealth does not corrupt character. It reveals it. If you are generous now with little, you will be generous with more. So you consciously detach morality from money. You remind yourself that resources amplify impact, that stability reduces stress, that prosperity in responsible hands creates protection. And finally, you guard your speech, not in a fake, overly positive way, not pretending bills don't exist, but you eliminate identity statements tied to lack. Instead of I'm broke, you say I'm restructuring. Instead of I'm terrible with money, you say I'm learning financial discipline. Instead of money disappears from me, you say I'm building stronger systems. Language shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcome. This is not mysticism. This is alignment. I want you to notice something powerful. None of this requires external permission. You don't need someone to lift anything off you. You don't need to search for hidden enemies. You don't need to blame unseen forces. Because the moment you take ownership of your internal narrative, you dissolve the authority those narratives had over you. And here's the final truth most people aren't ready to hear. Poverty is not just the absence of money. It is the absence of belief in personal agency. The most dangerous curse is convincing someone they are at the mercy of circumstances forever. But you are not. You can learn new skills. You can restructure debt. You can create additional income streams. You can invest slowly and wisely. You can shift environments. You can change your circle. These are practical actions. And practical action is the antidote to helplessness. Once identity shifts, guilt dissolves, and speech aligns, your decisions begin to change. You start negotiating. You start tracking. You start planning. You start saying no to what drains you and yes to what builds you. Momentum replaces stagnation. And here is what I learned after leaving everything behind. Real power is quiet. It's disciplined. It's consistent. It's not dramatic. It's not flashy. It's not chaotic. It's intentional. No hidden curse can survive sustained intentional action. If you felt stuck for years, don't interpret that as proof you're doomed. Interpret it as proof that conditioning is powerful. And powerful conditioning requires deliberate deconstruction. You are not powerless. You were programmed. And programming can be rewritten, but only if you're willing to question the stories you've repeated for years. So tonight, I want you to pay attention to your thoughts when money comes up. Notice the tension. Notice the language. Notice the identity you default to. Because awareness is the moment the cycle weakens. And the moment you stop unconsciously participating in those three hidden curses is the moment your financial reality begins to shift. Not magically, but intentionally. And intentional power is something no curse can hold.